Take your things and get off my property. My mother said that, then she picked up my army duffel with both hands and threw it off the porch into the snow. My sister needed my bedroom for a podcast studio, and apparently a soldier could sleep anywhere. I was still holding the anniversary gift. I'd bought them a weekend at a lake resort, $1,100 I'd saved by eating instant noodles for 2 months in a place where the water tasted like dust. She never even looked at the envelope. The deadbolt clicked, the porch light went black, and through the door I heard her laughing. I want to be honest with you before I tell you the rest. Stories like this one sit in my chest for days. Because the cruelty isn't loud, it's casual. It's a woman laughing through a locked door at the daughter she just put in a snowbank. My name is Captain Dana Reyes. I'm 29. To my family, I was a broke nobody in a uniform, a girl who'd thrown her life away on a government paycheck. That was the story they told at dinner. It was also the most useful lie I have ever allowed to stand. I stood at the bottom of those porch steps in the freezing dark with 3 black trash bags at my feet. That was it. 29 years as Marla Reyes's daughter, and my entire civilian life fit inside garbage liners knotted at the top. I didn't care about the clothes or the shoes. My hands were already digging through the duffel, clawing for one thing: a flat black laptop, the machine that held every encryption key to every account I owned. Accounts worth more than that house and everyone breathing inside it, combined. My fingers closed on nothing. The bag was too light. Way too light. A cold spike went straight through my stomach. I dumped everything onto the frozen lawn shirts, a cracked photo frame, a charger tangled like a dead snake. No laptop. I checked every pocket, every seam, ran my hands along the lining twice. Nothing. So I pulled out my phone and opened the tracker I'd hidden inside the hard drive casing 2 years earlier. At the time, it felt paranoid. Now it felt like something closer to prophecy. The green dot wasn't at my parents' house. It was blinking 3 miles south, at a place called Quick Coin Pawn and Loan, a cinderblock box wedged between a vape shop and a taco stand on the rough end of Federal Boulevard. My mother had reached into my own bag, taken the most valuable thing I owned, driven it across town, and sold it before I'd even found a place to sleep. The pawn shop smelled like gun oil and old cigarettes. A long glass case ran the length of the room, full of dead people's watches and other people's worst days. I set my military ID on the counter hard enough to rattle the trays. That laptop is government property, I told him. It holds classified material. Hand it over. The owner, a heavy man with a stained collar and yellow fingertips, didn't even look up from his phone. No receipt, no merchandise, he said. Call the MPs if you want. Processing takes about 3 weeks. 3 weeks was plenty of time for that drive to be stripped and sold piece by piece. Every position I'd built over 11 years would vanish. Every key compromised. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. But I didn't panic. We don't panic. We assess, we adapt, we overcome. I walked back out into the parking lot. The wind cut across my face like a blade. I dropped the tailgate of my old pickup, dragged all 3 bags down onto the asphalt, and started tearing them open with my bare hands. Plastic ripped. Old jeans, peeling sneakers, a faded hoodie from a high school that never felt like mine. My whole civilian existence spilled across the ice. My mother had packed these bags herself, crammed 29 years into trash liners like she was clearing out a dead tenant. And I knew, the way I always knew, that she'd left a trail. Arrogance makes people sloppy. My fingers found a crumpled wad of paper deep in the pocket of an old pair of jeans. A yellow carbon receipt, smeared with dried coffee. Quick Coin, Pawn, and Loan. 1 laptop computer. Payout. $800. She hadn't just thrown me out. She'd picked through my bag while I loaded the truck, sold the most expensive thing I owned for pocket change, and then tucked the receipt into my own clothes like a goodbye note written in pure contempt. If you've ever been treated like a stranger by the people who were supposed to love you most, you know the specific cold that goes through you in a moment like that. It isn't anger, not yet. It's the feeling of a floor you trusted your whole life turning out to be painted over open air. I walked back inside, slid my personal credit card across the counter, and paid $800 to buy back my own property from a man who couldn't be bothered to look me in the eye. The laptop was cold and heavy in my hands. I tucked it under my arm and left without a word. I'd barely settled back into the driver's seat when my phone lit up. An automated message from the state DMV. Title transfer completed successfully. The truck, The truck I'd paid for in full with $38,000 wired from a combat deployment, but registered in my mother's name to save on insurance, had just been sold through an online broker 20 minutes ago. While I was on my knees in a parking lot tearing through garbage, my mother was at home selling the vehicle out from under me with a spare key and her name on the paper. $38,000. Gone. Just like that. I called her. She picked up on the second ring, like she'd been waiting. "What now?" she snapped. A sitcom laugh track played behind her. "You sold my truck," I said. "I sold my truck," she corrected. "My name's on it. I needed the deposit for your sister's launch party. You're in the military, the government takes care of you people. Go get another one." Then the line went dead. The laugh track cut off mid-burst. I set the phone on the dashboard with a steady hand. I wiped a clear streak through the frost on the windshield and watched my breath fog and disappear. Then I reached into the glove box, pulled out a pen, and wrote 2 words on the back of that yellow receipt. Full audit. That was the moment it started. Not the eviction. This. I flipped the receipt over to write, and a second scrap of paper was stuck to the back, glued there by old coffee and lint. I peeled it free. A crumpled medical bill from 25 years ago. Children's Emergency Ward. Patient, Dana Reyes, age 4. Diagnosis, high fever and seizure. Total, just over $4,000. My mother had deliberately stuffed this into the bag beside the pawn receipt. 2 pieces of paper, side by side. One said, "I stole from you." The other said, "And you had it coming." Here's the part the family never said out loud, but built their whole religion around. When I was 4 years old, I had a seizure. A raging fever, convulsions, an ambulance in the night. I don't remember any of it. But my mother had to rush me to the hospital instead of attending a private investor meeting for a startup she'd been personally invited into at the ground floor. That company went public a few months later and detonated. Early money turned tiny sums into millions. My mother missed it, because her daughter was seizing in the back of an ambulance, and she never forgave me for it. From that night on, I wasn't her child. I was the bill, the defective kid whose broken wiring cost the family its fortune. She calculated that imaginary debt down to the cent, added interest in her head, and spent the rest of my life making me repay something I never borrowed. The collection started when I was 16. My first job, stocking shelves after school for not much over minimum wage, and she took more than half of every check. She called it rent and restitution. I ate the free cafeteria lunch and skipped dinner most nights, so I could hand over the full amount without coming up short. When I enlisted at 18, it didn't stop. It got worse. She had my direct deposit details. She knew my pay schedule. Every single month, like a utility bill, a new emergency. The furnace, the car. Your sister needs this. The lie rotated. The result never did. My money left and never came back. I opened the laptop right there in the lot and pulled up 11 years of pay records. Line after line after line, glowing against the dark. Hundreds of transfers. Money wired home from bases on 3 continents. And one memory came up through the floor of me before I could stop it. A deployment 2 years back. A mortar round hit close enough that the shockwave squeezed my eardrums and turned the whole world into a high, thin ringing. I was crouched in a reinforced position, body armor crushing my ribs, grit between my teeth, 72 hours with no sleep. My hands were shaking not from fear, from exhaustion, and in those shaking hands I was holding a deposit form, rerouting my entire re-enlistment bonus back to an account my mother controlled. $14,000. She'd told me my sister needed emergency surgery. Unbearable pain, she said. I signed that form with a hand that smelled like smoke and dried sweat, sealed it in an envelope, and handed it to a runner sprinting between bunkers. The money landed stateside 3 weeks later. It paid for lip filler, a designer handbag, and bottle service at a club 2,000 miles away. My blood, earned under fire in a country that wanted me dead, turned into a prop so my little sister could pose for her followers. I knew the exact amounts, because I pulled the receipts later. She hadn't even deleted the history. And here's what none of them knew. What I had spent years making absolutely certain they would never find out. They thought I was a broke desk clerk, a paper pusher in a dead-end uniform. That was the disguise, and it worked perfectly. I was a financial intelligence officer attached to a joint task force. My actual job was tracking dirty money through defense contracts, auditing black budget spending, and tearing apart the cooked books of contractors who overbilled the government by tens of millions. My clearance gave me access to systems most generals couldn't even ask about. The year before, between salary, special duty pay, and classified management bonuses, I cleared more than $600,000. I drove a rusted truck and wore thrift store clothes because I understood one iron fact about my mother. If she ever caught the scent of real money, she wouldn't just leech off me. She would strip me to the bone and boil the bones for stock. I reached up, took hold of the chain around my neck, and pulled my dog tag free in one sharp motion. The little stamped rectangle still listed my mother as my emergency contact, the person they'd notify if I came home in a flag-draped box. I rolled down the window and threw it into a slush puddle. It went under the gray water without a sound. No more next of kin. No more mother. Just numbers now. The clean, merciless arithmetic of the United States military. If you've ever had to admit that someone you were supposed to be able to count on would not even notice if you were gone, you know that move. You know it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like setting down something you've been carrying so long your arm forgot it was ever empty. 3 hours later I walked into the duty station on base. The young private behind the counter took my access card with both hands. He fed it into the reader. The screen flashed once, then lit up with a red border pulsing around the whole monitor, a silent alert I'd seen exactly twice in my career, both times for people nobody below the rank of full colonel was cleared to process. The kid's face drained of every color it had. His throat bobbed. He looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen, like he was praying the data would rearrange itself into something less terrifying. "Ma'am," he said. "Top-tier compartmented clearance. I need to call the commanding officer. Now." Within 90 seconds, 2 senior officers came out of a back hallway, squared up and saluted. And I'll be honest with you about what that did to me. It wasn't pride. It was that a kid 6 months into his enlistment had just shown me more respect than my own mother had managed in 29 years. The last time I'd texted her good news that I'd made captain, she took 4 days to answer with a single line. "Can you send an extra 500 this month? Your sister needs new photos." That was the equation. It was never going to balance. I walked into a secure office and bolted the door. 3 monitors came up. The room smelled like old coffee and static. I cracked my knuckles, an old habit from marathon audits, and went to work. Every civilian thread tied to my name had to be cut. The joint account, frozen. The emergency credit card she carried, killed. Her cosigner access revoked. Every autopay feeding any family account, terminated. If she still held any card, any checkbook, any scrap of paper with my routing number, it was now dead plastic and worthless ink. I built that wall in 40 minutes. Defense complete. Then came offense. I traced the $38,000 from the truck. I expected a mortgage payment, utilities, something desperate. Instead, every cent had gone to a single vendor, an event company. I pulled the invoice. A $1,600 chocolate fountain. A life-size LED ice sculpture of my sister's face. 40 bottles of imported champagne. My mother had sold my only transportation to throw a launch party for my sister's influencer brand. A brand with a big follower count, 0 real deals, and a budget paid entirely by my combat deployments. I could have filed a police report for the truck, but her name was on the title, and any prosecutor would call it a family dispute. Bail by lunch. That was too small, too survivable. I didn't want to slap these people. I wanted to pull the foundation out from under every lie they'd ever told and watch the whole rotten structure fold in on itself. So I kept digging. I aimed a credit trace at my parents' full financial records, and the file opened like a body bag being unzipped. It wasn't a balance sheet. It was an autopsy. They'd refinanced the house 3 times in 5 years, pulling out cash each time and burning it on a lifestyle they couldn't afford. 4 credit cards, all maxed. Payments missed for 3 straight months. Collection notices piling up in a rented PO box so the neighbors wouldn't see. On the surface, my father still played neighborhood king, grilling on a credit-financed grill and bragging about investments that didn't exist. Underneath, they were balanced on a tower of debt that a strong wind would topple. And then a red flag pulsed in the corner of the screen. Notice of default, filed 30 days ago. The house. The same house I'd just been thrown out of so my sister could record a podcast. It was already in pre-foreclosure. The bank was a month from taking it. The empire wasn't an empire. It was a condemned building with a fresh coat of paint, and the wrecking ball was already mid-swing. Poverty isn't leverage. So I kept going. And 3 layers down I found their Hail Mary. A brand new refinance application, pending review. Their last shot at keeping the roof over their heads. I scrolled to the income section. Co-applicant, my sister. Stated annual income, $200,000. Source, brand partnerships. I laughed. One short, ugly sound that bounced off the bare walls. My sister had never earned $200 in a year, let alone $200,000. No W-2. No tax return showing anything but zeros. My mother had fabricated an income statement and submitted it to a federally insured bank. That isn't a family squabble. That isn't creative accounting. That is federal bank fraud. Wire fraud. Conspiracy. A sentence measured in decades. I backed the file up across 3 separate servers. Then I picked up a phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in over a year. 2 rings. A voice like gravel and old whiskey answered. Webb, I said. Colonel, it's Reyes. I need a shell company registered before sunrise. And tomorrow morning I need you to make a phone call to my mother. A pause. The clink of a glass being set down. Send me the brief, he said. I'll have it filed by 4. No questions. That's how debts work between people who've served together. You don't discuss them. You honor them. He owed me his career from a deployment where I'd caught a contractor diversion that would have stranded his entire unit. I fixed it and never mentioned it again. At 9 the next morning, he made the call. He slipped into the role like a trained operator, the polished cadence of old money, a managing partner representing an anonymous tech investor who'd taken a personal interest in my family. The investor, he explained, was impressed by my sister's potential and wanted to consolidate the family's debts as part of a larger investment in her brand. All it required was a standard personal guarantee. My mother swallowed it whole. She didn't pause. She didn't ask for a website or a reference. She didn't search the company name. The pitch confirmed every grand fantasy she'd ever had about herself, and that was all the due diligence she needed. Greed is the most reliable anesthetic in the world. It numbs the exact instinct that might have saved her. I watched from a dark room on base, logged into the family email account she'd never thought to lock me out of, because she genuinely believed I was too broke and too stupid to matter. Her reply came in 4 minutes. 12 paragraphs praising the family's vision and excellence. Not one sentence asked where I was sleeping that night. Not one asked if her oldest daughter was safe. I had been erased. Written off as a line item. My jaw tightened until the cord stood out in my neck. Then I breathed. Counted to 4. Released. Control. Webb fired the next shot. To finalize the disbursement, he said, kindly forward your most recent refinance application so our underwriters can cross-reference the valuation. A perfectly routine request. If my mother had one working moral nerve, she'd have hesitated. She'd have realized that application held a fabricated income, a federal crime in black and white with her signature on it. But honesty needs self-awareness, and she'd cut hers out decades ago. She attached the fraudulent file and hit send. The notification chimed. I opened it. The smoking gun. A falsified federal loan application, sent voluntarily from her own address, bearing her own signature, delivered straight into a server I controlled. She had braided her own rope, tied it to the beam, and mailed me the stool. I closed the laptop. The trap was loaded. Now I just needed them to walk into the room. I got to Webb's law office an hour early. The conference room was all dark wood and polished surfaces, the kind of place built to make people feel important enough to sign anything. Through the one-way glass of the next room, I could see the empty chairs and the champagne sweating in its bucket. I pulled the door shut and stood in the dark with my hands behind my back, and I waited. They came right on time. My father first, crammed into a gray suit, a size too small, chin out like he was posing for a magazine. My mother behind him in a new cream-wrap dress, $1,200, almost certainly bought with the money from my stolen truck. My sister last, trailing like a bored teenager, sunglasses pushed up on her head, both thumbs on her phone, not one glance at the room around her. Webb poured champagne with the ease of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. Our partner is very enthusiastic, he said. He sees generational potential, but a commitment this size needs the highest personal guarantee. We'll need you to secure it against your primary asset, the family home. My father puffed up, drained his glass in 2 gulps, and announced the family was rock solid and ready to back it with everything they had. My mother nodded hard beside him. Even my sister looked up long enough to smile. Webb slid the contract across the table. 63 pages of dense legal language. My father snatched the pen and signed every flagged line without reading a word. My mother co-signed with a flourish. My sister added her signature as a witness, then immediately turned to take a selfie with her champagne, lips pushed out, flash on. None of them turned to the page with the cross-default clause, the one stating in plain language that any false information in any related application would trigger an immediate, automatic default, with no warning and no appeal. And none of them read the page after it, the one holding a deed in lieu instrument, which meant that the instant a default triggered, full ownership of the house would transfer instantly and permanently to the shell company. No courtroom, no judge. Automatics. They drank my champagne, congratulated themselves on their brilliance, and signed away their house to the daughter they'd thrown into a snowstorm 72 hours earlier. Now I want to slow this all the way down, because this is the part the whole story has been walking toward, and I want you to feel every second the way I lived it. Webb squared the pages with 2 taps against the table. Excellent, he said, sliding them into his case. The funds will be dispersed shortly, but first, our partner has asked to come in personally and offer congratulations. My father jumped up, tugging his jacket straight, smoothing his thinning hair. Webb stepped back, hands behind his back, his face showing nothing at all. The double doors opened. I walked through them. No ripped jeans, no hunched shoulders, no eyes cast down. I walked into that room in my dress uniform, pressed to a razor crease, every ribbon stacked in precise rows across my chest. Campaign stars, commendations, a unit citation from a deployment they would never be cleared to know about. My shoes were polished to a black mirror, and every step I took on that hardwood rang through the silence like a hammer coming down. The air in the room collapsed. My father's welcoming grin froze, half-formed on his face, like a mask cracking down the middle. My sister's mouth fell open. Her phone slid out of her hand and hit the floor screen first with a sharp crack. She didn't pick it up. I walked to the head of the table, slow, each step spaced about 2 seconds apart, the pace of an executioner approaching the block. I stopped behind the chair at the head, placed both palms flat on the wood, and let the silence do my talking for 3 full seconds. My mother broke first. The old programming kicked in faster than thought. Her finger shot toward my face, and she screamed at Webb. "How did she get in here? She's nothing. She's a leech. Call security and get her out." Webb didn't blink. His face could have been carved from the same stone as his name. "That won't be necessary," I said. My voice was low and even, the register I used in rooms where the wrong word could end a career. I held her eyes until the color drained out of her face like water from a cracked glass. I reached into my breast pocket and pulled out a crumpled yellow slip. The pawn receipt. I raised my hand and slammed it flat on the polished table. The crack echoed off every wall. "This is the receipt for my laptop," I said. "You took it from my bag and sold it for $800. I paid to buy it back with my own money." I paused, let the silence tighten, then I used that same laptop to buy something else entirely. My father's palm hit the table and his mouth opened to erupt. I leaned forward 3 inches and dropped one word from a height that had once stopped a sergeant mid-stride in a combat briefing. "Sit." He folded into his chair like a puppet with its strings cut. I pressed a button on a small remote I'd set on the table. The lights died. A projector threw a sharp white rectangle on the far wall. A document filled it, every word readable from across the room. Certificate of property ownership. Previous owners, my parents. Current owner, the shell company. My mother staggered back, one hand on her chest, the other clawing the table edge for balance. Her lips moved, trying to rewrite reality through sheer denial. No, that's temporary. It's just collateral. It doesn't actually mean." "Allow me to correct your terminology," I said in the flat, exact voice I used to deliver audit findings to 3-star generals. "You used this house as a guarantee against a fraudulent loan. Because the application was fraudulent, the loan defaulted automatically. Because it defaulted, the deed executed on its own. This house, as of the moment you signed, belongs to me." My father lunged across the table and grabbed Webb's sleeve. "You set us up," he said. "You're criminals." Webb peeled his hand off one finger at a time, the way you'd brush lint off a jacket, without effort, without acknowledgement. "Every document was disclosed," he said. "Every signature was voluntary." "Good afternoon." He picked up his case, nodded once to me, and walked out. The door latched behind him with a soft click that sounded like a vault ceiling. I advanced the slide. The fraudulent application filled the wall, the same file my mother had emailed with her own 2 hands. I drew a red dot across the income line. Stated income, $200,000. I held it there and let the number burn. She has never filed a return showing income above 0, I said. You invented this and sent it to a federally regulated bank. That is criminal fraud. And here, even with all of it laid out, I want to be fair to you about what I felt, because for 1 second, looking at my mother's face come apart, I understood her. Not forgave her. Understood her. I was looking at a woman who'd stood in the doorway of a fortune 25 years ago and watched it disappear because her child needed her, and who never once let herself grieve it honestly. She'd rewritten that loss into a debt and rewritten her own greed into justice, and told herself the whole way down that she was simply collecting what she was owed. That's how ordinary people talk themselves into unforgivable things. Not by deciding to be evil, by deciding they're the ones who were wronged. Understanding it didn't move me 1 inch. My sister sat frozen. No phone, no filter, no smirk, just wide eyes on her own name, beside a fake income figure 8 feet tall on the wall. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. My mother crumbled, shoulders caving, tears spilling. Real or performed, it no longer mattered to me. She reached for my arm. We're family, she whispered. We're blood. You wouldn't really do this to your own mother. I pulled away. Family doesn't throw their daughter into a blizzard, I said. Family doesn't pawn her laptop for party money. Family doesn't sell her truck for an ice sculpture. I tapped 1 finger against the face of my watch. Once, twice, 3 times. You have 48 hours to remove yourselves and your belongings, I said. If you damage 1 wall, this entire file, the fraudulent application, your signature, your IP address, goes to the FBI. Bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy. At your age, you would not come out. I buttoned my jacket, straightened my cuffs, and turned my back on them. Choose wisely. I didn't look back. Behind me, there was only my mother's ragged breathing and the hum of the projector still throwing her crime across the wall. They were gone in under 2 days. The threat of prison turned out to be far more persuasive than blood or loyalty or 29 years of pretending. When I walked through the front door, the house was hollowed out, drawers hanging open, hangers scattered, scuff marks on the floor where they'd dragged furniture too fast to lift. I didn't feel triumphant. I sat at the dining table, opened my laptop, and did math. $38,000 for the truck, $800 for the laptop. Then a second spreadsheet, 13 years of every dollar she'd taken since I was 16. Hardware store wages, basic training pay, deployment bonuses, hazard pay, holiday pay I'd sent home instead of spending on a hot meal. Every amount, every date, documented and totaled. This story taught me something it cost me 29 years to learn. The mistake most of us make is believing that blood is the same thing as family, that being related obligates you to keep paying a debt that was never real. What I finally understood is that blood is just biology. Without basic respect, a family is only strangers sharing a last name. The bonds that actually saved my life were built in dust and fire by people who never once asked me for a receipt. Those were real. The ones at that dinner table were not. So here's the one thing I'd ask you to do today. Sit down and actually look at where your time, your money, and your peace are going, and ask whether any of it is flowing to someone who treats your loyalty as something they're simply entitled to. You don't have to do anything dramatic. Just look. And here's the question I want you to sit with tonight, honestly. Is there someone in your life you keep paying in money, in guilt, in second chances for a debt you never actually owed? Sit with that one. It matters more than you think. Before I close this out, I want to hear from you, because I read these. Comment a number 1 if you think I went too far. Comment a 2 if you think they got exactly what they earned. And comment a 3 if you honestly don't know what you'd have done in my place. Because if that's your answer, it might be the most honest one in the room. Tell me where in the world you're watching from, and what time it is there right now, because I love seeing how far this story travels. And if you've ever had to cut someone out of your life who was supposed to love you, tell me about it. I promise you there are more of us than anyone admits. If this story moved you, even a little, do me a kindness and subscribe and stick around, because I tell these stories for everyone who's ever been treated like a wallet with a heartbeat and finally decided to walk away. I'd be glad to have you here. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Denver to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.